Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing, some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. This is from Hebrews 13, verse 2. Do angels exist? Some would say it is a figment of one's imagination. Fiction just like werewolves, vampires, and fairies. Let me tell you though, I believe they are around us. They are here to guide us, protect us, and teach us. They may be unseen, but sometimes they may show themselves. I want to tell you 3 stories of my experiences. One may say it's a coincidence, but I believe that there is a higher power protecting us. You can judge for yourself what you think. I will share with you 3 stories of my encounters. Many of you may have had similar experiences. The first one I will share, I call Icy Road with Friends. One winter day, I was driving with 2 of my friends in my Pontiac Grand Am. I was between my late teens to my early 20s at the time. I can't remember where we were heading, but we were going westbound on Highway 401. This major highway services southern Ontario going west to east. The roads were pretty icy at the time, and cars were driving cautiously slowly. At most, they might have been traveling at around 60 kilometers an hour, where typically on this highway you'll see drivers driving 100 kilometers plus. We were about to pass the McCowan Road exit when we hit a patch of ice. As vigilant as I was driving, we hit the patch and the car spun. It spun towards the left concrete barrier. Then without even hitting the barrier, it spun towards the opposite one, the car spinning in a deadly spiral across the multiple lanes of the highway. Through this event, all I could think of was, I pray to God that we don't get hit by a car as we spun through the center of the highway. I tried to stabilize the car by rotating the steering wheel left and right. It was almost pointless as the car seemed to have a mind of its own. As we spun and slid towards the right barrier, another thought came to mind. Please don't hit it, please. We inched closer to the guardrail, or barrier, and I braced myself for the impact. Suddenly, the car just stopped on the shoulder of the highway with maybe a foot of space between the barrier and the car. As soon as we stopped, I looked at my friends and asked if they were okay. They were both eerily calm as they conveyed that they were fine. My heart was still beating through my chest. Unbelievably, we avoided the barrier. In fact, both barriers. Even more unbelievable is that when I looked rearwards, there wasn't any cars behind us. About 30 seconds before, as sparse as the highway was at the time, there were cars around us. The craziest part of this story is that the car ended up facing in the correct direction of traffic flow. As our hearts and minds settled, I looked cautiously to make sure that there weren't any cars coming our way, and I slowly pressed the gas. It ended up that our drive afterwards was pretty smooth. I was more aware, but I felt a calmness. All I kept saying to my friends and people who would listen was that we were protected by our angels. In my head, there seemed to be too many things that could have gone wrong, but it ended up that for that 30-second moment, light was shining down on us and everything seemed directed for our protection. I thanked God profusely that day. I walked around with confidence knowing that the good Lord had my back and had my friends' backs. The second story I want to convey to you is what I call pranic healing. Sometimes the people that get under your skin are actually those that are messengers and teachers. I am a massage therapist who believes that my skills are God-given and that my skills should be used to glorify God. I am a Catholic and I go to Mass practically every Sunday. I've been taught to avoid certain practices that could be construed as New Age. One thing I take into consideration is the passage in Scripture that states, "Teacher," said John, "we saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we told him to stop, because he was not one of us." "Do not stop him," Jesus said. "For no one who does a miracle in my name can in the next moment say anything bad about me. For whoever is not against us is for us. This is from Mark 9, verses 38 to 40. Whenever I make an attempt to provide any form of treatment, I ask the dear Lord to be with me and allow me to be a vessel for healing. As I mentioned before, I do what I do to glorify God. From a superficial level, I do enjoy the positive outcomes that treatment may provide. At a higher, possible spiritual level, I feel a strong sense of fulfillment. This is different from using a gift to glorify the self and to have that mentality that I am doing this on my own. This would be a me type of attitude, a sense of self-importance without humility. Having given you this preamble, over one weekend years ago, Sandra, my wife, and I participated in an energy healing course. This course taught a form of energy healing named pranic healing. The basic idea of what this involves is a form of healing requiring non-touch, using visualization of energy and manipulating that energy on the person being healed. There's a lot more to do with this, but I just wanted to give you a rudimentary idea of what this entails. Regardless of one's opinion of energy healing or pranic healing, this is beside the point. The following day, on the Monday, we went to work. Sandra and I own a massage therapy clinic located in Toronto's financial district. It seemed like a regular day until we finished and headed towards the train station to take our 1-hour ride back to our place. We got to the station and find out that there were train delays. The station was packed. The passengers waiting for our train waited patiently for the announcement that the train was going to arrive. Eventually the announcement came and the crowd walked slowly towards the stairs to get to the platform. Typically people walk in an orderly fashion, very polite and courteous. As we walked, I noticed two individuals who were obnoxiously loud and rude. They butted in front of people, which made me furious. In my head, I judged them and I thought, look at these two lowlifes. It's like they've never been around people before. I made another judgment. One was an older, obese man and the other was this younger, tall, blonde man. In my anger, I thought, freaking guys look like the number 10. We finally got on the train and headed for home. On the ride, I had forgotten about the two obnoxious guys. I did, however, start noticing a headache coming on. Overall, the ride seemed uneventful. My headache seemed to be getting worse. Sandra reminded me that we had to pick up some groceries before heading home. We usually park our car at the station, pick it up, and drive home once we arrive. I told her that I wasn't feeling good and I just wanted to get home and rest. We got home and I laid down. I ended up waking up at around 8:30 in the evening. I felt a lot better and I told Sandra that I decided I was going to go do a quick drive to pick up some of the groceries that we had meant to get once we had arrived. I jumped in the car and drove to the grocery store. The store closes at 9 and I got there at 8:45. I scampered out of the car and ran to the grocery store picking up the few things we needed. Once I completed what I needed to get, I lined up to pay. All of a sudden, I hear a commotion. I turn to see what was going on, and I see two familiar faces. The two obnoxious guys that I had seen at the train station were there. The tall, skinny dude seemed to be in a panic, and the older, obese man was clutching his side with an anguished look on his face. An employee got him a chair, and he sat down. I tried to ignore the situation. I paid and left and went straight to my car. After putting the groceries into the trunk, I sat in the driver's seat staring. I was asking myself, what should I do? I even asked the Almighty, are you testing me? After all, we had just completed a healing course over the weekend. Is the Lord testing me to see if I will use what I learned in a faithful way? I sat there for a few minutes. It was a little past 9 now, and I don't notice that the automatic doors were opening and the two men were walking out. As I observed, I realized that if I was going to make the attempt to try these new techniques I learned, I was going to have to do it in the parking lot. Although the store had closed, there were still some cars in the lot, with potential people milling about. I made the decision. Screw embarrassment and judgment, I had a mission. My mission was to use the skills that the good Lord had given me. I opened the car door, stepped out, and walked towards the two men. The anguished man was sitting on a raised platform, still looking like he was in a tremendous amount of pain. Reluctantly, I opened my mouth and introduced myself. I conveyed to them my intent to try to help him using what I had learned. At this moment, I felt both crazy and embarrassed. What was I thinking? They probably think that I am insane. To my surprise, they enthusiastically gave me a yes. I said a quick prayer for guidance. I got into focus. With this style of energy healing, you use your hands to assess a person's energy field. Use your hands to notice any sensation that may tell you where an individual's issue may lie. This could be sensations such as a thick feeling. This is the sensation I noticed around the right midsection of the man in pain. It was a very thick sensation, almost like motor oil. You also use your hands to treat this area. To correct any issues in and around a particular area by using your hands to scoop this pathological energy sensation. After a few minutes of me treating this individual, he started to convey to the young man that he was feeling the pain fade and that he actually thought what I was doing was working. After I completed the session, they both thanked me. They appreciated my help. The younger man told me that the person in pain was having issues with his liver and that they had to go to the hospital for it recently, and that the man had recently broken up with his girlfriend. I told them that I appreciated that. They allowed me to help them. I also told them to go to the hospital just to have him double checked. I also mentioned God bless. I blessed them. I went back to the car and drove off. I watched my rear view mirror as they faded from my sight. I praised God and thanked Him for the lesson and allowing me to work on someone with the gifts allotted to me. It was an amazing feeling. I had to pull to the side and call my parents to tell them what had happened. I needed to tell the most faithful people I knew. The phone call was short. I was extremely excited to pass on my experience. Afterward, I drove home with that fulfilled feeling. That feeling that I knew that the good Lord is constantly watching me. Sometimes He uses tests to see how I would react. It is also to give me notice that He has His eyes on me. This is one of those times. The funny thing is, to this day, I have never seen these individuals again. Our town is very small, and one might think you would bump into someone a few times throughout one's lifetime in such a smallish town. Maybe they were from somewhere else. Who knows? Remember, these two were very distinct. In my furious mind, I had called the two the number 10 earlier. I asked the good Lord to forgive me for my evil thoughts. I believe it is so true to make sure you are careful how you treat strangers, as they could be angels in disguise. What do you think? My final story I call The Boat. Out of my 3 experiences, this arguably might be the craziest. I left the Philippines when I was 3 in 1977 to join my parents in Canada. At that time, my 2 Lolas, my grandmothers, on both sides of my family, escorted my brother Ariel and I to meet up with my parents. We had to take a ship from one island to another to catch the airplane to Toronto. I've never been on a boat before, so this was a new experience. The trip seemed very smooth initially. What happened midway through the voyage was terrifying. Our ship got caught in a terrible storm. The boat swayed and pitched in an insane dance. Like cruise ships, on these boats had large rooms with multiple beds. There was basically a bunch of people all in one large sleeping quarter. People around us were crying and screaming. Initially, I was calm. This was until I saw both my Lolas on their hands and knees, begging and praying to God for safety. As a 3-year-old, when you see 2 adults that are your rock fall on their knees, crying and praying, that would terrify you. And it terrified me for sure. My mom would tell me in my adult years that it was the worst storm that had been seen at that time in the Philippines. She also told me that the storm was so bad that the ship had actually lost contact with land. A tempest this bad and contact being lost led my mom and my relatives to think that we were goners. I remember being so distraught that I wouldn't stop crying. What made it worse was that I also noticed some water sneaking through the bottom of one of the walls. My grandmothers tried their best to keep my brother and I calm, while they were trying to also hold it together. Between the wailing and the crying, and the overall chaos on the boat, I noticed a man enter the large room. He was a distinct-looking man. He was tall, had grayish silver hair, and to add to the distinctness, he was white. In In later years, remembering this man, I realized that he reminded me of the tall, middle-aged white dude who used to be on the Glad garbage bag commercials back in the 80s and 90s. We Filipinos tend to be darker skinned with darker eyes and are generally shorter in stature. So this guy stood out like a sore thumb. He was a cheerful guy with a calming energy about him. He looked at me and picked me up. He cradled my little 3-year-old body in his arms. As I slowly relaxed, my eyes noticed that on one of his hands he had an extra thumb. I thought it was strange, but I shrugged it off. I eventually fell asleep. When I woke up, the storm had subsided and we were docked. I looked around for the man. He was nowhere to be found. We got our stuff and disembarked. Walking off the boat, I recall looking around, and our boat and many of the other boats that were docked had some damage on them. My Lolas, Ariel, and I walked off the boat relieved. The man who had comforted me stayed on my mind. I eventually asked my Lolas where he was. Their answer to me was, "What are you talking about?" I was confused. I repeated myself again. "You know that tall white man with the gray hair? He picked me up." They insisted that they had no idea what I was talking about. Either they had issues with their eyesight, or it never actually happened, or I experienced something supernatural. I became more insistent. I described him again, and I added that he had an extra thumb. They both gave me a strange look, and once again denied they saw this man. How could this man have been missed? He was distinct, and everyone should have noticed him because of how different he was from the rest of us. Alas, I gave up. I just kept thinking it was very strange how something so real that I encountered could be missed by my 2 Lolas. To this day, I tell the story and I still wonder about this man who picked me up, calmed me down, put me to sleep through a violent storm on a boat in the middle of the sea. In my later years, I read up on angels, and one thing that stood out was that angels apparently have an extra appendage. To me, it became clear that man had an extra thumb. That has been etched in my mind. I believe I had a supernatural encounter. One that to this day I still hold dear to my heart. I had encountered my guardian angel, and I do thank him for his comfort and protection. The good Lord always walks beside me, cradles me in the palm of his hand, and uses his devout servants to assist us in times of need. What do you think of my stories? Do you believe them? Are you a skeptic? Maybe you want to share your thoughts. Maybe you have stories. Share it below. We will see you in the next video. God bless.